We've been trapped in this concrete rat cage for 2 months now. Those still alive live in the barricaded safe zones. During the day, some venture out to scavenge and loot whatever supplies they can find. But at night, we are the hunted ones.
I remember the announcement trailer for Dying Light like it was yesterday. Techland's next big brand new IP, breaking away from the Dead Island games. It was them with a new publisher and a fresh new concept for a genre that has otherwise been pretty heavily saturated with competition. An open world survival horror zombie game with combat centered not on guns but around melee. It was something familiar for those that played the previous Dead Island games, but with a few new, rather unique twists. The way you traversed the world was not by driving or simply walking from point A to point B in tight corridors or streets heavily crowded with the shambling undead, but rather through parkour, running on rooftops, climbing on top of vehicles, using verticality to escape, or in some cases, gain an advantage, as parkour wasn't simply a means of traversal, but intertwined with the game's combat system. As you played more, progressed further, and got more comfortable in the game's systems, combat and parkour were one and the same, fluidly combining one move to initiate the other. Fight or flight becomes a matter not of so much survival, but the individual's desire to kill, or simply use the infected as a means to move around faster. The other unique twist was the day and night cycle. It wasn't just a gimmick for the game having the ability to rotate times a day to feel more like a lived-in world. Fuck no, this was different, and a fundamental part to Dying Light's DNA. During the day, you're the hunter. There's very few things that can really challenge you during the day. There are some buts, like when you first start up, you're most likely going to err the side of caution and run away from anything, because if you challenge the infected now, well, let's just say you're going to learn the hard way. But as you progress and get stronger, become more agile, and harder to get winded or become more effective at killing, during the day the only things that can really kill you are maybe demolishers or yourself, and I kill myself a lot. You have 12 hours to rule over your dominion, and keep these growing infected numbers in check, because come nightfall, it's an entirely different game. The hunter becomes the hunted. Predictable, weak fodder zombies during the day can and will become unpredictable and aggressive at night, evolving to gain the ability to chase you at full speed, climb up rooftops behind you, and call on other infected as they do so. There's no spot that can't follow you except here. Safe zones exist because of video game logic, but for the most part, you either gotta get creative and find a way to lose them, or stand and fight, but doing so runs a risk of you bringing down the real threat on you. Volatiles. Infected that are stronger, faster, and deadlier. These guys you can't even hope to physically outrun or outclimb, and if you're at a high ledge they somehow can't reach, they'll spit acid at you. Dying Light is an action-packed, first-person zombie game that turns into an intense survival horror game, and to this day is one of the best and most unique titles I've ever played. And whether by personal experience or me actually remembering the game climate at the time correctly or incorrectly, it was the very first game that in my opinion ushered in the next generation of gaming. The original Dying Light released January 26, 2015. Prior to it, conceptually or technically, there was nothing that came close to really provoking that sense of awe that this is what gaming is now. Fast forward 7 years later and its sequel is bigger and more ambitious than I could have ever imagined, and dare I say ushering in the next generation of consoles running at a pristine 60 FPS with ray tracing, or one or the other if you're playing on console. And because barely anyone can still get a new console, I'd say it's technically a launch title. Since April of 2021, with rumors of sexual allegations and after a few delays on the game's release date, leading to murmurs of the game being in development hell, Techland has been drip feeding us information on what to expect with this massive sequel. And I've spent the last few days combing over everything, and well, let's go over the list of things. 500 equipable items, over 140 various weapons, new zombie types, completely reworked combat and parkour skill sets and animations. They've even got far enough to say that they've removed all player limitations in movement, making the flow of parkour into combat even more seamless than before, with the two providing new opportunities the original game could never have provided. They've even mentioned a more intense nighttime experience with more zombies and zombie types than the original game, and probably the two biggest things being a big emphasis on the story, which the original game's story was serviceable, but when you think Dying Light, I doubt anyone thinks a story. The only people that most likely really know what it is are the ones that played the game a few dozen times, as it's pretty bland. And personally, for me, it doesn't have too many memorable moments. Off the top of my head, I can think of the death of Raheem, the death of Jade, and the death of Rise. But the last one was more how shitty that QuickTime fight was. Timon Smectala could have literally came out and just said the plot of this game was you're a blacksmith who gets a hard-on for swords and because it's the modern dark ages, you gotta court your sister who gets trapped by the Illuminati, but because you're fat and need to lose weight, you become a parkour god. I mean, fuck it, that works. And the Illuminati joke was a reference to the first game. But no, instead they decided to really make this world, characters, and story believable with a new city alignment system that's designed to have you feel the impact of your decisions and how you want your world to be shaped. There's a real meaning and consequences behind what you do, and while it may seem like the city alignment system is something to look forward to after the combat and parkour improvements, I'd say it's really one of the same, as the environments you're running through are going to impact your killing techniques or escape methods based off what faction gets what part of the city. And here's the really big one that I think is being horribly underlooked. The music. Music, atmosphere, and environments are something that goes criminally underrated in video games. Bad music and soundscape is like bad controls. You don't notice it until you experience it, while good controls are like good music and soundscape. They just work as expected. Dying Light 2 is going to have dynamic music, which, let me explain this to you. The original game doesn't have it, or if it does, it's nothing to what we're getting. The original game has some ambient music, some noise coming from infected like moans and groans, and you'll hear the chilling pipe being kicked or glass broken around the corner, but the most music you'll hear comes from the chases at night by volatiles that does exactly what it's meant to do, get your heart rate going. You also hear some music around main quests, but that's ultimately it. You're left to utter silence in Haran. Dying Light 2, each faction has its own music. Each area of the city has its own music. Based off what you're doing in what area of the city against what faction determines what music you hear, or if you're just running over rooftops, the music plays in a way that crescendos. The more parkour movement you do on the roofs, the better the music gets. And it's described as eventually hitting a point where the movement is led by the music and makes you ultimately not want to stop moving. Once you take this to the ground level though, it stops. You know why? Because it's an audio bug that's got to be patched on day one. And I'm kidding. The ground floor is death. That's where the infected are, and the rooftops are where life lives. It's a stark contrast, and interestingly, there's actually a narrative reason that explains the decision as to why the music stops on the ground. Basically, due to chemical attacks to stop the spread of the virus, the soil can no longer support any kind of organic life. So, along with the infected, the lack of plants, and even the music are all meant to leave a feeling of despair and death. Dying Light is a game within a game. Can you imagine the drastic change in tone from day to night based off the music alone? That first time experiencing Nightfall, or even venturing into a dark zone, is definitely going to be one that leaves a lasting impression. Needless to say, I'm excited for Dying Light 2. I mean, let's be honest, any game has a possibility of flopping. I'm hoping it doesn't, but of course, only time will tell. We'll see how this plays out once the game drops February 4th. You know, and I don't want to put my foot in my mouth, but I would even say that if this game delivers on everything they promised, it'll be a prime example on how developers should do a successful sequel. You take the essence of the original game, the DNA, in this case Dying Light's parkour, melee-based combat, those are intertwined, plus the evolution of the infected over nighttime, expand upon that, but also improve on the weaker elements, which in this case, the story, maybe to a degree the world, and you didn't even know it was a problem, the music. In the meantime, leading up to this game's launch on February 4th, maybe consider subscribing, as in the upcoming weeks I'm going to take a deeper dive into Dying Light 2's new systems and bring everyone up to speed on everything they need to know for this game's rapidly approaching launch date. You can also join the Discord to chat with myself or anyone else about Dying Light 2 or really any other games. I mean, it's an open space. Link is always down in the pinned comment, but until next time, I'll see y'all later.